Hey there, my name is Mackenzie and welcome to my little corner of the internet. If you're new here, it's nice to meet you, and if you're returning, welcome back. Today I will be discussing various different Japanese musical artists that I recommend as somebody who's been listening to Japanese music for 18 years. That's most of my life at this point. I'm going to be focusing on 5 main categories: female groups, male groups, female soloists, male soloists, and bands. This is going to be a 2-parter, so this video is going to focus on groups and the second part will focus on soloists and bands. I also want to quickly clarify that this video is a recommendation video based off of my own personal favorite acts and my own history with listening to Japanese music. These are not all of the artists I listen to. This is not all of the music that I enjoy. These are just specific that come to mind when I think of what I would recommend to somebody who either doesn't know where to begin or has started in a very specific place and doesn't quite know how to expand from there. So this is not a reflection by any means of what is currently popular within the Japanese music market, what is currently selling really well. This is just my personal favorites and acts that I think deserve spotlight and appreciation. I hope this video will help you find a new favorite artist, or at the very least, 1 or 2 new favorite songs. So let's get into it. For each artist in this video, I'll be giving a bit of a rundown about this group, about what I like about them, and just a little bit of their history. I'm going to try to stick mostly to the music as best I can, and I'll be giving 1 album recommendation and 3 song recommendations as to where I think you should start. I'm gonna start with the idol collective Hello Project, as that was my gateway into Japanese music and the world of idols, but also because it's absolutely massive and you could spend literally months just exploring your way through Hello Project's discography alone. Hello Project is an idol company that's made up of several groups with a very long history. It's considered the company that popularized the rotational idol group format that many idol groups have today, where members graduate from the group and new girls are added. Morning Musume is the beginning of this, and for the longest time was the only group to have this formation style until fellow sister group Anjurimu adopted it in 2015. Since then, all Hello Project groups have become rotational, which has created an admittedly very exhausting experience for more dedicated fans. I could go on and on about my 18-year history with Hello Project and how it's changed over the years and how I've changed as an idol fan over the years and how my view of idols has changed, but that'll be for another video. I'm going to start with disbanded groups because I don't think that just because a group is disbanded that means their discography should no longer be appreciated by new fans. I think that there's always some value in looking back at groups that used to exist and seeing what they created during their time and getting to enjoy that. There's so many gems within these groups, and I think it would be a shame to not recommend them. We're going to start with Buono. Buono was actually my very first idol group that I ever got into and was my gateway into Japanese pulp culture and entertainment. The group was made up of 3 of Hello Project's strongest performers from the Hello Project Kids lineup of talents, and created this new unit that would solely be designed for the sake of singing the opening and ending theme songs for the Shukokera anime. Buono ended up becoming so incredibly popular outside of the anime's fanbase that ultimately, when the anime ended in late 2010, they decided that they would continue the group because their popularity was just too immense to not do that. Buono was a little bit unique in the sense that, for one, their music style was more pop rock flavored. That wasn't as common at the time with idol groups. I'm not saying there weren't idol groups that existed that did this style of music, but I'm saying that for mainstream idols, this was not common, and their music was definitely very fitting of the anime, very fun, very feminine, very girly, but also had a little bit of edge to it, very much like the protagonist of the anime. It was very fitting. As the group developed, they started going more into straight rock sort of sounds and developing a more wider range of rock genres within their discography, and also a few other types of things too. But Buono was very much a very band oriented group. So they were also one of, if not, I believe they were the first idol group to use a proper backing band for all of their shows, and they sung live every time except for that one time. But that wasn't their choice. That one just kind of called for it, all things considered. They did dip into more pop around the Partenza era, but other than that, Buono was, for the most part, very band sort of music oriented, and it suited them really well. Their live performances are actually the best way to get to know Buono and to really experience them, so I do strongly recommend watching their 2017 concert, or even their 2016 one, both of them. There are so many clips up on YouTube. I recommend those because that was truly Buono at their peak. Although all of their live performances are fantastic, no matter how far back you go. The girls were always very talented and very charismatic and great performers, but definitely if you're just getting into them at this stage, I would start with those videos. My album recommendation for this group would be their third album, We Are Buono. The first two were very idol-y, very cutesy, very much shugokara coded, but We Are Buono, which was released in 2010 prior to the group's shift from shugokara era to being officially a group outside of that, it's very much a darker album. It's got a lot more mature themes to the music, and the songs are definitely moving out of that really idol sound. There are some tracks that still have this, but I love their third album. It is to this day one of my favorite J-pop albums. I think it's really solid and I recommend you give it a go. My 3 song recommendations for Buono are Hatsukoi Cider, which is a fan favorite. It's a must recommend. Independent Girl, which is another fan favorite and definitely a harder rock track. And Urahara. I can never skip that song when it comes on. It's so good. And the live performance of it with their cute little like almost like maid sort of gingham outfits, it's too good. It's too good. To this day, that performance still stands up. I love it so much. I kind of want to get a little bit ahead of this before I bring up the next 2 groups, because I think, especially if you're coming from a K-pop perspective, this might feel a little bit weird, but I think it's really important for me to mention this, and I think I will. If any of you would like to see a video on this particular topic, I would like to do one. C-ute and Berryz Kobo, who I'll be talking about next, they're 2 sister groups, and obviously when these girls debuted, they were very, very young. The youngest were like 7, 8 years old. Actually, when C-ute started as an indies group, I think Mai-chan was 6 years old, and that sounds very alarming and seems very strange to a lot of people, but I think it's important to remember that even at the time that these girls debuted, this was not the norm in the idol industry. In fact, I'm pretty sure they were some of, if not the first idols to debut as young as they were, and they were not treated with any amount of respect as a result. They suffered a lot of bullying from actual grown adults who didn't think that they should be idols at that age. It was really, really rough on them, and I feel that that's important to mention when talking about these groups, especially from a recommendation standpoint. I think the amazing thing about these 2 groups, because they debuted so young, you have a really unique opportunity to see these girls go from these young kids who can't hold a note for shit to being incredible live performers, just absolutely stunning. And getting to actually watch that progress over time is really an amazing experience, and especially because I grew up with these 2 groups. They were within my age group at the time of their debut, and I got to literally grow up with them. I had a very unique experience in that sense with these groups, so they both hold a very special place in my heart. Because they were my age or older, they were like the sisters that I never had, that I got to look up to and admire and copy and emulate, and I think that these 2 groups are just very special to me, so I'm very excited to recommend them. However, I do recognize that some people are not into listening to younger groups. I think it's unfair because some of their songs are absolute bangers and deserve to be listened to, those songs as songs. It shouldn't matter what age of the person singing them. The songs themselves are good and should be appreciated for what they are individually. But I do understand that some people just aren't ready for that yet. So for that reason alone, I do recommend starting with the older stuff from when the girls were adults and working your way back, if you would be more comfortable doing so. So now we're gonna segue into C-ute, which one of the members of Buono is also a member of. This was her main group, C-ute. I will talk a lot about C-ute in my soloist section because I'm a huge Irie fan, and I have been since Buono, but I'm not gonna gush too much more about her. I'll save that for Irie's portion of the second video of this series. C-ute is probably my favorite girl group of all time, which is not easy because there's so many girl groups I do genuinely love and think that there's like a lot of great things about them, but C-ute I think would have to be my number one if I had to choose. The group had a pretty rough start, but after a few years of a lot of rough shit, they started developing a bit of a momentum that just kind of kept going and going and going, and unfortunately I personally feel that they stopped way too soon. They had so much more to go, and it still breaks my heart to this day. C-ute started off with 8 members, and in the end they had 5, but they had 5 for the majority of their time. They're 5 more than they were ever anything else, so I don't think of C-ute as 8 or 7 or 6. I think of them as 5, and I think most people do. Out of the 2 sister groups, Berryz and C-ute, they were definitely the one given more cooler, more mature songs, which really pissed off the Berryz girls. The shit I could tell you in a Berry Q video, I'm not even, some of the beef was wild, but C-ute used to get a lot more cooler songs, and this is very evident when you're comparing them back to back with their releases they're releasing at the same time. It's crazy. With C-ute, when it comes to their more recent discography, I would literally recommend anything from the last 5 years of their existence up until 2007 when they disbanded. My album recommendation for C-ute is their final album, C Major 9. It's a stunning album. It's not even, there's not a single skip on that album. When it comes to song recommendations, I recommend Mugen Climax. The entire Nazehito single, I know that I'm a little bit cheating here because that's 3 tracks on that single, but literally every single one of them. Also Kanashiki Heaven. But seriously, the last like 3 to 5 years of their existence, it was just banger after banger after banger. Like when I tell you they ended before they were even at full power, I'm not even joking. Just give those tracks even a try, you'll see what I mean. I do also recommend C-ute's live performances as well, but definitely check out the music videos because a lot of their music videos near the end of their run were really, really lovely, really well put together. Oh, I should say though that if you're coming from K-pop, do not expect K-pop level production on these music videos. You're not gonna find it. J-pop acts typically, unless they're backed by a K-pop company, but like J-pop idols that are backed by regular J-pop idol companies don't do all that cool CGI shit with their music videos. The songs are gonna sell well anyway. Why put all that money into something that they don't have to put the money into, you know what I mean? I think that's really the most important thing to remember here is Hello Project specifically is bad for this. If they don't have to put the extra money into something, they just straight up won't. I'm just letting you know here, don't expect great things from Japanese music videos. They're much more simple, much more budget friendly, but they can still be lovely even like that. They're still worth watching. When it comes to older Kyoto songs, if you do want to check out their older discography, Forever Love, Namida no Iro, and you know what? Sakura Chirari is kind of my jam, but it's definitely a slower pace song. It was their major debut song, I guess. Dance to Bakun. That song is a fan favorite, and it's fantastic in lives. From like the 2010s era of Kyoto, like the early 2010s, definitely Dance to Bakun. That was like one of the songs that first kind of gave them a new wave of popularity and kind of almost breathed new life into the group when they weren't doing so well at the time, sales-wise. As for Berryz Kobo, they debuted first before Kyoto. The original concept behind Berryz didn't pan out, but it would go on to inspire Akipi when he was creating AKB48. He did end up basically stealing that idea and using it, and it became a huge success. To this day, I wonder what would have happened if Berryz had actually gone through with that concept, but we ended up with what we ended up with. This is how history panned it out, so it is what it is. Like Kyoto, the last few years of their run were probably their strongest, not just in terms of sales, but also in terms of just general music and image, really. Berryz started out being sort of more of a goofy group. Berryz had very goofy shit, like a lot of the time. They were being put in monkey suits and shit, which as teenagers they weren't loving. They did it, they were pros about it, but they admitted later that they really were not happy during this era because they were embarrassed by a lot of the shit they were being given. And as they entered into their late teens and early adulthood, they started getting more mature tracks and things that were more suited for their age range, and they were just on fire. But when they disbanded, unlike Kyoto, which was a genuine shock to everybody, it wasn't a shock when Berryz announced their disbandment. It very much felt like incoming, you know? So it's a shame that they ended when they were just kind of hitting a good stride, but some members had very clearly like checked out. It was very clear they weren't as invested in the group and performing as idols, so it was probably for the best, really, that they ended when they did. My recommended album is I actually don't have one. At the time that Berryz was active, I loved a lot of their music, but when I was actually getting ready to make this video and I was kind of looking back on their discography, I realized that there isn't a single album of theirs that stands out as solid, really. I guess maybe album 5 might be a particular highlight, but that was like, Berryz just had a lot of quirky shit going on, and a lot of that experimental stuff was in their albums. I feel like Berryz is a little harder to recommend for because they were a lot of the time a little bit of an acquired taste. Like if you're not used to the Hello Project sound, especially if you're coming from K-pop, I don't think Berryz are gonna appeal to you initially. I think their A-side singles will appeal to you to some degree. That's where I would start, and then if you really like them enough, then try their albums. But I don't think their albums are where you should start by any means. When it comes to their individual songs, I highly recommend Romance wo Katate. Otona Nano Yo. Those are hands down some of my favorite music from Berryz, and I think Want was kind of a turning point for them as a group. That song did really well in comparison to their previous releases, and I think it was what kind of made the production team behind Berryz want to pursue a more mature sound for the group and realized that the group should go more in that direction. Admittedly though, I didn't love Berryz as much as C-ute, so they're not as strong of a recommendation for me. Like, if you're gonna choose one of the groups, especially if you're coming from K-pop, I do think that C-ute is where you should start. But both of these groups were great for their own reasons, and they definitely both deserve a go, in my opinion. Moving on to more recent groups, Kobushi Factory will be my next disbanded group that I recommend. When Berryz announced their disbandment, they announced that they were debuting a new group and that this would be a successor in spirit to Berryz Kobo, hence Kobushi Factory. Kobo means factory. They started out with the same amount of members. It was 8 members, just like Berryz started out with, but ironically, Kobushi Factory ended up mirroring C-ute much more closely in terms of history. They started out really strong, just like Berryz did when they debuted, but had a lot of back-to-back issues, a lot of scandals. I could do a whole video on Kobushi Factory alone. They were a wild roller coaster ride, man. Just like with C-ute, they had a lot of different things happening. It was just like bad luck for the group, like they were like cursed or something. And then they ended up with 5, and that became the strongest version of that group. The best formation of Kobushi Factory was the final 5 members, just like with C-ute. So it's a little bit ironic that the group started out as a Berryz successor, but they actually in the end more closely mirrored the path of sister group C-ute. And unfortunately, just like C-ute, they ended way too soon. The company really did them dirty, and I'm still not over it. I'm just not. I never will be. It will always be a crime. I will always mourn the loss of Kobushi Factory. They could have been so much more. They had some of the best vocals in Hello Project history. Like, these girls were on fire. They were incredible performers, and they were known for being very strong live performers. They had slightly unorthodox songs, just like Berryz did. That's kind of where you saw a lot of that similarity, a lot of that influence. But I think that their performance ability really kind of made up for that. If you really like quirky, kind of out there stuff, I think you'll really like a lot of Kobushi's discography. My recommended album would be both their first and second albums. They only had 2. I recommend them both strongly. Their first doesn't have a single skippable song. It's phenomenal. And their second was really, really great as well. They really ended on a strong note with that one. As for my recommended songs, I strongly recommend Haru Urara. Seishun no Hana. And Nen ni wa Nen. When Then was their debut track, but I think that 5 Nin Kobushi sang that like rent was due, dude. Like they killed it every time. I strongly recommend that. I also really liked Survivor, which was a theme song for a musical. So although it was released as a B-side, it wasn't like an official Kobushi song, if that makes sense. But I definitely recommend that one as well. Next, we're gonna go into country girls, and we're getting into cutesy, feminine, girly idols with this one. Country girls were another group that was done dirty for real, and I'm still not over this one either. I have so many grudges against Hello Project from all of these groups. Country girls originally started as Morning Musume's sister group, Country Musume, in the 90s and early 2000s. They ended up fizzling out, and they were reignited in 2015 with Berryz Kobo's Momoko leading the group as playing manager, and acting as both a member of the group and a mentor to the members and kind of teaching them how to be really good idols. And considering she's one of the best idols to ever be an idol in this industry, it was very fitting for her to take on that role. Country Girls had a very cutesy, very retro vibe. If you like retro aesthetics, you'll really like Country Girls. They very much felt like classic, old style retro pop. It's not super common right now. It wasn't even really super common at the time either. They were very unique while they were running, but even now I haven't seen another idol group like them since, and they're definitely worth giving them a try. My recommended album is actually their final compilation album because you'll get so much out of that. I admittedly didn't listen to their I don't even remember if Country Girls did release an original album under Country Girls. I don't think they did, and if they did, I think it was like a mini album or something. But honestly, if you like cutesy feminine pop, you're gonna love everything they do, so it doesn't really matter. But their compilation is solid. It has some new tracks on it, it has all their old tracks, their singles. Definitely worth giving a listen. As for recommended songs, I recommend Boogie Woogie Love, which is an absolute banger. Tamerai Summertime. Peanut Butter Jelly Love. And I'm gonna give you a bonus, Dodate ii no. I get this song randomly stuck in my head just at random intervals in my life. I don't know what triggers it. All of these songs have very retro feels to them. I'd recommend just binging their entire A-side discography, but like those songs in particular are standouts for me. Moving on, because I'm so tempted to go on a rant about Country Girls and how they were done dirty, we're gonna move on to Smilage. And Smilage is gonna be a little bit controversial for those of you who are Hello Project fans. Before you go raising your fingers and telling me, well, actually, give me a second, I'm gonna explain this choice. So Smilage was a group that started out as 4. They had a very cutesy, feminine, girly style, and they were like, I think what a lot of people think of when they think of Japanese idols. And their concept was the idols with the shortest skirts, and their main style of music was cutesy, bubblegum, feel-good pop. And this suited them. This worked really well. They ended up having a bunch of lineup changes, and fast forward a few years, they decided to rebrand into Untitled. Now, this was a really controversial decision at the time. Smilage at that point was actually doing really well with the 6 members and the concept that they had at the time. This felt super unnecessary. Like, I didn't understand it then, and I still don't understand it now, because the 2 older veteran members did not think that the 4 newer members were capable of carrying on Smilage when those 2 eventually would leave the group. They decided that rather than letting Smilage continue that way or disbanding the group as a whole, that they would rebrand into Untitled. They would have a name change, and they would have a concept shift, and they would add 3 new members to the lineup, making them a total of 9. So this worked really well. Untitled did really well hereafter. They were a really strong group performance-wise. I don't have any issues with Untitled as a group. I just think that they should have just disbanded Smilage and called it a fucking day, and then just re-debuted the girls in a different group under a different name. I feel like that would have made more sense. But the reason I'm putting Smilage in as a disbanded group is because in my mind they are. Like, as far as I'm concerned, Taiki Banse is Untitled's debut single. They have been in recent years very much distancing themselves from their Smilage origins, so I don't think that this is even that controversial at this point. I think the group and the management team themselves are already also kind of seeing a line in the sand between the 2 groups. anyway. I just want to quickly clarify that so that nobody attacks me with pitchforks in the comments section, because I know Smilage didn't officially debut, they just rebranded, but for the sake of this video, I'm considering Smilage a separate thing from Enjinuma. Smilage is very cutesy, very feminine, very playful. They definitely had some quirky moments for sure. They're definitely a little bit out there, but they were at their core just very sweet, light, bubbly pop. And I do think that they're definitely up your alley if you're someone who likes pastel, feminine, cutesy sort of aesthetics. I recommend their first album because that was the only one that they released as 4 members, and I think that's like peak Smilage era, the original lineup. And my recommended songs are Ama no Jaku, which was their first indie single. Their debut single, Yuma Made It 15. And finally, 18 Emotion. This song actually came out the year that I turned 18, so it has a special place in my heart. I played the shit out of that entire year. I was the main character, okay? Every time I played that song with my earphones, I was the main character, no matter what. When it comes to Smilage though, I will give a 4th recommendation, just like with Country Girls, because I think they deserve it. Chikyu wa kyou mo ai wo hagukumu. It's so freaking good. That was their last single, 6nin Smilage under the Smilage name, and I think it's a really good representation of where the group was when they ended, and I think they could have gone so much further as Smilage, but I digress. And that brings us to the end of part 1 of this little series recommending my favorite Japanese music acts. I didn't film a proper ending for this part as I didn't plan on having to split it in 2, so I just want to give a quick thanks